Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to a special edition of the Van Buren Variety Show. Glad you're able to join us. I am Bob Van Buren, your host. At the time of this episode, we have just passed the 20-year anniversary of 9/11, the terrorist attacks in September 11th, 2001. We've all heard from past generations where they were, what they were doing, and how they heard news of certain American tragedies. If we go back in time, we've heard maybe from our grandparents, even our great grandparents, where they were when they heard about the stock market crash in October 1929, where they were when they heard the Japanese Empire attacked Pearl Harbor in December 1941, where they were and what they were doing when President Kennedy was assassinated in November 1963, and also what they were doing and where they were when the Space Shuttle Challenger was destroyed and blew up in January of 1986. But for our generation, people that have remember September the 11th, 2001, one of the worst terrorist attacks uh, uh, on this country. We all know where we were, what we were doing. And so hopefully we can share some of that with you, and that maybe later on, years from now, generations from now, we'll hear our stories to see where we were on that catastrophic day. I do remember that. It was a Tuesday and it was a work day. I was employed with the bank in information systems. Primarily, my job was ATM debit card processing. Beautiful day. It was sunny outside. Had no clue what was going on. Yeah, got in right at 8 a.m. in the morning. But there was a young lady that came down the hallway from the department, and she's like, "Bob, have you been hearing the news?" I'm like, "No, I don't have a radio in here." She goes, her exact words was, "I heard a plane hit the World Trade Center." And my reaction was, "Wow, what a terrible accident that was." We had a little mini TV in there, just a little bitty screen. It still had the aerial. You couldn't really get a lot of good reception, but we were able to get in there. And just when I had tuned in, we heard through the static that a second plane had hit. And me and her looked at each other. We're like, we're under attack. So they had brought a TV in from the training room, a color TV, downstairs, and work pretty much stopped at this bank, at least in bank operations. Nobody did anything. Nobody said anything. Everybody was glued to the television. And then we heard about the Pentagon. Then we heard about the plane going down in Pennsylvania. One of my jobs as ATM debit card monitor, my boss asked me to log into this PC where I could see the different ATMs we had across our branches. He wanted to see if there was any larger than normal withdrawals. Obviously, he was making sure there was no run on the bank. I remember seeing some large withdrawals, the normal, like $300, $400, $500, but it wasn't something people were just constantly getting money out. So I think people were just getting money, extra money, just in case. But most of all, I mean, work just stopped. I mean, nothing really happened that day. Every kind of processing, any kind of IT problems was gone. We were watching the television, and they were playing the video over and over of the second plane that hit, and it was very tragic. So I was on the second floor of a bank in a data processing center, and that's what I'll remember always. And it was really sad because the young lady that told me that she heard some news, of all things, her sister was a stewardess on an airline, and she knew that she was in New England somewhere where the other planes had left. So she didn't hear from her sister about an hour. So this lady was a jangle of nerves, almost unconsolable. Finally, I don't know how it happened, but our sister called their mother. And no, she wasn't in that area. So she wasn't on that plane. So we were like, yeah, but I feel sorry for everybody else that did have loved ones on that. That doesn't make it any less tragic. So anyway, long story short, I was working for a bank, second floor, data processing. And it was a day that I'll never forget. And I'm sure you watching know exactly where you were and what you were doing and how you first heard the news of that really, really horrific event for everybody concerned. What I have done, ladies and gentlemen, I have contacted past guests from my show. Each guest, as you know, talks about a different topic each week. but I've contacted many of them, and they're coming back for this special episode, this 9/11 memorial episode, to talk about the same thing, where they were, what they were doing, and how they first heard about it. So, without further ado, let me bring someone on right now. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Tex. He was on episode 1, my premiere show, talking about cryptids. Tex, welcome back to the Van Buren Variety Show.
Thank you, Bob. I appreciate it, man. Thanks for having me back.
Great. Thank you. Welcome to this special 9/11 edition of the Van Buren Variety Show. So I'll just put the question to you, Tex. Can you share with ladies and gentlemen where you were, what you were doing, and how you first heard about that tragic event?
Yeah. Actually, like you said, it was a work day, and I was working second shift at that time. So I was at home asleep. Yeah, I was asleep. But my wife called me and woke me up and said, she goes, "Have you seen the news?" I said, "No." She goes, "Turn TV on right now." I'm like, "What's going on?" She goes, turn TV on, turn TV on. So it was right after the first plane hit. I turned the TV on, I sat down, and I got to see the second plane hit. And honestly, it was like somebody hit me in the gut with a bat. I mean, it was just realizing what was going on, and really as a vet, it's a lot of things I think go through your head that well, we're probably going to war if we're not already excuse me, at war. And you start thinking, well, there's a possibility I may have to go back into service. So, but there's so many emotions that went with that day. But honestly, I think the biggest one for me was anger. And I had to go to work that day. So I kind of sat there and stewed. And it's not just, the second plane hits the trade center. Well, but that's not where it stopped. Then you had the other two planes. So at that point, we're wondering what other major cities are going to get attacked. I was anyway. But what was really, really strange is because where I worked was in the flight path of DFW, with one of the largest airports around, and it was just nothing was flying. Everything, and it was eerily quiet.
I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah. And where I worked, a lot of the people that worked where I did were Middle Eastern descent. And almost all of them wouldn't even look you in the face when you were walking through the hallways.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I mean, they would duck their head, and I mean, it was almost like they were ashamed of what had happened. They knew that they were being scrutinized probably by most people at that point. But what you have to remember, this was not a race of people that did this. This was a fanatical bunch of people that did this, and with
extremists. Yeah.
Right. And I think one of the hardest things for me was I was walking down the hallway, and I came up on a group of about 5 guys they were all Middle Eastern descent, and they were standing in the hallway. Kind of went this way, and it went this way, and then it turned back this way, dog-legged. They were over here in this corner of the hallway where it turned, and they were just laughing and carrying on, and talking. And of course I couldn't understand, they were talking their language, and I couldn't understand what they were saying. But, and so I don't know if what they were saying, but I will say this. I don't care what you're talking about or what they were talking about. That was not the appropriate place or time to be laughing and carrying on
the day of, especially.
Yeah. And it was, I hate to say it, but it took everything I had not to lose my job that day and just go right in the middle of them.
Did they see you coming?
Yeah, I walked right by them. Looked at, that's what disturbed me really, because they looked at me and just kept laughing.
Oh no.
You know, so it was, like I said, I don't know what they were saying. It could have been something, you know, just a funny story somebody told, you know, because a lot of people deal with, you know, tragedy differently. You know, maybe they were just trying to take their mind off of it. I'm not going to just, at that point, I was guilty. I just assumed the worst.
Absolutely.
You know, and I was just so freaking mad. I went down to our shop, our office, and I said, I'm just going to wait till everybody gets out of this building, because I can't stand to be around. If this is what's going to happen, I'm going to do something that I'm going to regret, you know. And so I just removed myself from the situation. But I had a very, very dear friend. You know him.
Yeah.
Danny.
I know you're talking about.
Yeah, Danny P. is who I'm not talking about. Big Danny. I'm talking about.
I know you're talking about. Yeah.
Right. He, at this time, he was actually living in Manhattan.
Well, I didn't know that.
Yeah, when the attacks happened, and we could not get a hold of him. You know, and you know, that little group of us that we've known each other as long as you've known each other, 30 plus years, and we're all scrambling trying to get a hold of him, trying to get a hold of his family, trying to see if they've heard anything. And I didn't hear from him till it was either late that night or the next day that he was okay, because communications was almost nil coming out of New York.
It was gone. You could forget about it. Yeah.
So we didn't know if he was alive or dead or what, you know, but he was living in Manhattan at that time. Wow. And what's weird,
he was okay.
Yeah. What's weird is he was living at the opposite end of Manhattan. And he said, I didn't even realize it happened until I saw the news until he heard it on the news.
Sure.
He was far enough. He never heard anything, never saw anything. Of course, when he walked outside, that changed.
Sure.
But he's like everybody else. I didn't know anything until, you know, the news hit.
Right.
So
that's where you were. You were safely asleep and when the world all went to hell.
Right. Right.
Oh, wow.
And also
to wake up to that news, right?
Yeah. I worked with a woman that was a paramedic. I worked as a paramedic for a while, and I worked with a woman that she went up there and volunteered right after doing the recovery and rescue and stuff. That was interesting. So, but because I was on the volunteer fire department at that point, you know, and that was rough.
Yeah, because you didn't know if was it going to stop at New York and Washington, or where else was they going to go? You know. So.
Yeah, and I mean, and we were sending stuff up there, anything that we could do to help the guys. You know, a lot of people were their jobs understood, and they let them go up there and volunteer to help those people out.
That's awesome.
One of the worst stories that I heard come out of New York that day was when after the attacks and all the everybody's just covered in dust and choking and they're trying to get water and for all the victims and the rescuers and everything is there was and I really don't want to mention the name of the company, but there was a very, very big coffee company that was there, and they would only they wouldn't let the first responders anybody have water. You had to buy it.
Oh, that's just
like,
oh man.
What are you thinking?
Everybody trying to make a buck. It's just
I don't think it lasted long.
Yeah, I'm sure it didn't.
And I know they got raked across the coals for it. But that was one of the worst things that I heard. There was a lot of people don't understand or don't know about this one. The chaplain for the New York Fire Department was killed that day.
I've heard that. I've heard that. Yes. True.
The way he was killed was what's odd. Is he was killed by somebody else that had jumped out one of the windows. It was just there were so many stories that
it is absolutely. Well, Tex, I appreciate you coming on for this special 9/11 memorial. It doesn't seem, for those of us, I mean, I don't speak for everybody, but for myself, sometimes it doesn't seem like it's been 20 years long. Sometimes it's shorter, but sometimes it in a way, I can't hardly believe it's been 20 years already. But to the families and survivors of that, our heartfelt sympathy to you. And again, this is a memorial to those innocent victims as well as the heroes, the firefighters, the paramedics, the military, and the firemen that were all there that day. So again, Tex, thanks you for coming out.
Thanks for having me, Bob.
Okay. And ladies and gentlemen, before I bring my next guest on, let's just bring some photos up. Here was the New York skyline prior to September the 11th, 2001. The Twin Towers, 110 stories each, and just a magnificent building and one of the biggest symbols of our commerce, our capitalism. They were attacked that day, as well as the Pentagon here that you see in Washington, D.C. Again, a work day, so there were a lot of people at work in those towers, a lot of people at work in the Pentagon. This picture I'm going to show you is in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. This was one of the planes that went down. The passengers actually attempted to take over the plane from the hijackers because they were now fully aware what was going on. And the plane went down in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. This is a memorial to those brave people on the plane that decided, hey, we're not going to go down without a fight. So again, everybody's, a hero. So definitely a very good memorial there for them. So let me bring in my next guest now. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Randy. Randy was on episode 5 of the Van Buren Variety Show to talk about his career in the U.S. Army. So, Randy, welcome back to the Van Buren Variety Show.
Was it that early on?
So, welcome. I'm glad you're here for this 9/11 memorial service 20 years later. It doesn't seem like it's been 20. So, I'll just ask you the same questions I'll be asking everybody on that day, September the 11th, 2001. Where were you? What were you doing? And how did you first hear that something was out of the ordinary?
Well, I tell you right now, it was a Tuesday morning, and I just got done with PT out at Fort Bliss, Texas. 6:30 PT formation. We got done 7:30. By the time I got back to the house to get my personal hygiene done, get the shower, shaved, and get ready to go in, 7:45 to 7:50 or so, we just got word about. In fact, I heard it on the radio driving home about the first plane actually hitting. And it was believed to be just an accident at that point, obviously. And so I was sitting there watching a little bit of it on the Today Show as I was getting my breakfast ready. It was about 8:05, 8:10, something like that. But I'm sitting there watching it, and as I'm watching it, I look, and that second plane hit right there. I said, "Oh my God, there's another one just hit." And then everybody's like, "Oh, we just think, they were dumbfounded. Obviously, they were like, okay, we don't know what just happened." I was like, "I can tell you exactly what happened. You just had another plane hit." But we were literally so dumbfounded at that point. It was just, then eyes were all glued on the TV. It wasn't 20 minutes later, I got the call, said, "Hey, we're initiating the alert roster. Everybody get in here now." Okay, got it. So we were on full alert for the next 24 to 48 hours. There was very, very little time at home at that point. We were prepping everything in case we had to go right then. But obviously that did not happen. And I was in an air defense artillery, a Patriot unit out in El Paso at that point. So it wasn't no way we were going to just pick up and go. But the unit I was in was part of the 18th Airborne Corps. So we had to be ready to go with a minimum engagement package, what we call a MEP. We had to be ready to go in wheels up in 72 hours. So were prepping to get ready to go, but we didn't know where we were going. Obviously, nobody knew at that point.
You didn't know what was going on. Then, of course, you heard about the Pentagon shortly
after that. Pentagon was later on that morning, and it turned out that my battalion commander, who had just done a change of command out there at Fort Bliss with us, my battalion commander had just left and went to the Pentagon. I think he was part of the quick reaction force that ended up going up and trying to pull people out of rubble and stuff like that, from what I was told. But he was just there. He had only been there a month and a half, 2 months max at that point. So, I mean, and I seen him later on, at a couple of things out at Fort Bliss, a couple of balls and stuff like that. And he was really shook up by it because he lost members of his team that day. So.
Oh man, it hit close to home.
Yeah,
there was so many people there.
Oh yeah, and I had medical friends from Germany in the late 1990s and early 2000s that they were stationed there as well. They were up at the Pentagon, and one of my old commanders, his entire team was wiped out up there.
Oh,
he was at that point, and to this day, from what I understand, I haven't talked to the man 20 some odd years. But what I understood from an old first sergeant of mine was that he was so messed up to this day, he is still kind of a little bit out there. You got to be careful around him.
If I can ask, where were they when his team got wiped out? Where were they?
They were literally where it hit at the D ring. That's where they were. They were almost at ground zero. I don't think they were right at the impact site, but they were in the same general vicinity. So I can't tell you if it was killed on impact or if they were part of the debris coming down after that. Sure. I couldn't tell you for sure.
So for the next 2 days, weeks, tell us with you being in the Army, just kind of run through like the weeks after that.
Well, it was kind of a blur. I don't know how to put it, because everything was so fast and so.
It did. It went really fast.
Yeah, I mean, we were constantly, on alert this way. We do muster formations because we had people that were constantly going and trying to push the system. Let's put it that way. Young soldiers are going to try to push the system. If you're on alert, I mean, I had a family there. I wasn't going anywhere. So, but they'd take off. They'd go to Juarez. They'd go wherever. Well, the minute this happened, 3 days after that, the border shut down. So.
Oh, I did. Shut down. Yeah.
It was shut completely down. There was no going in or going out, coming out of Juarez at all. So all these 18-year-olds on Fort Bliss that used to be able to drink and stuff, on Fort Bliss because they didn't want them going down and messing themselves up down in Juarez. Now all of a sudden they couldn't go down to Juarez. They couldn't drink on post. They couldn't. And so these young soldiers were having a big issue with it.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a day we will never forget. So.
Oh, no, not even close. Yeah. And I hate to say it like this. I mean, we went through a little bit of this stuff. Not really an attack on our homeland, but when Grenada kicked off, I had a battalion commander at Fort Bliss, that came in after the one I told you about that had to change command. I had a battalion commander came in, and his first rattle out of the box, he sat there and had a meeting with all the NCOs and all the soldiers. Every commander does their own little thing, but he's a battalion commander, and he told us straight out. He at that point it had been 10, 11 years since Desert Shield, Desert Storm. He said it's about time for somebody to get a wild hair up there, you know what, and step up and try and punch us in the face, and we're gonna have to go kick somebody. Excuse my language, everybody. We're going to go kick somebody's ass.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's exactly what it told us. And you know what? You had 200 people in a theater that were ready to go out and fight with him right then and there.
That's awesome.
2 years later, we ended up doing it in 03 on the initial invasion and everything too. Yeah. So it was just, hey, let's go have some fun now. We finally got a way, somebody to go get hold of. Was it right? Was it wrong? I can't tell you that. I was told where to go to and what to do. That's all I cared about.
Well, the way I feel about the extremists attacked us, they declared war on us. So, and we had that. So
we took care of. Now we can get into politics and all that other crap later. That's neither here nor there. We did what we needed to do right then, right there, and once they figured out who they needed to go after, that's when everything went after. Of course, what was it? Maybe a month and a half after that, all of a sudden we started bombing in Afghanistan.
Yes, it was very quickly.
Yeah, because we knew where he was. We just didn't know how we were going to get in there and get it.
Exactly. So, well, Randy, I appreciate you sharing your memories with us about 9/11 Memorial. 20 years later, it just, again, like I told the previous guest, it does not seem like it's been 20 years. Does it seem like it's been 20 years to you?
No, not really. But then again, before I retired, I was sitting there at Fort Hood, and they made me go to a assembly or remembrance of Desert Shield, Desert Storm. And this was in 2010, 2011, early 2011. Well, that was how many years? 20 years
20
at
years,
that point?
20
years at that point.
10 years.
No, it was 1991 for that. So that's 20 years.
Oh, that's 20 years. Okay, I got you. Yes.
Well, they asked for Desert Storm veterans to volunteer. Me and one other person in the battalion. That was it. So they just shipped people over there to look at them. Well, hey, guess what? I got to see George Bush Sr. I got to see Colin Powell. I got to see Dick Cheney. I got to see them all. I was happy. So I was good to go.
Good to go. Well, Randy, again, thank you for your service as well. And thank you for sharing your memories with us of 9/11. Have a great day.
You too.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we have a few more past guests waiting that I'll share with you. But again, I have some more photos I want to share. I believe most of, if not all of us, are familiar with this picture. This is the World Trade Center. I guess it was a few days after, and these firemen, these brave firemen, are hoisting the American flag again. Like, we're bruised, but we're not beaten. So I think that's such an iconic photo. And not just the firemen, the brave men and women that day, but also the cops. They also lost a bunch of their brothers and sisters that day. So, but the medics and, of course, the military, really heroes were to be found that day. And we do. And if you are a law enforcement, a firefighter, a paramedic, a military, believe me, you are appreciated. Thank you so much for your service. Okay, let's bring our next past guest on. Ladies and gentlemen. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Jason, and he appeared in episode 6 of my show. We were talking about heaven, and we were, speculating what heaven is like, and a place we all want to be. So, Jason, welcome back to the Van Buren Variety Show.
It's glad to be back, Bob. I appreciate you inviting me back on.
Okay. Well, this time we're talking about the 9/11 tragedy.
Yes.
We just passed the 20-year anniversary of that horrific event. So I'll ask you, like I'm going to ask every other guest that's coming up and past guest, where were you? What were you doing, Jason? And how did you first hear about something being wrong that day?
So I was in college. I was actually in a weight training class. It was like one of the first early classes that you could take. And so I actually just wrapped up. I had stayed a little later just to get a few more reps in. And as I was leaving, someone came out and said, "Hey, some plane just hit the World Trade Center." And at that point, we said, "Wait, you mean like the antenna that's on top of the World Trade Center, or one of the actual buildings?" I said, "Well, maybe it was one of the towers on top, but they had just heard it on the radio. They thought maybe it was a small lighter jet, like maybe it was even a Cessna. So I'm like, okay, cool. And I'm like, okay, I gotta head back to get ready for class. And as I was walking, Lisa, it was a beautiful day, but I had this weird feeling the entire time on the way back, walking back to my apartment. I lived on campus with my roommate, and I was walking, and I'm like, something's weird. I just felt off the entire time. I got back to my apartment, and I'm looking at the TV, and I'm like, I could feel it in the back of my head. There was this voice saying, "If you turn that on, your life is going to change forever." And it's like I actually avoided turning it on for a second, but it was like, no, I got to turn it on, and I turned it on, and immediately I'm watching the Twin Towers, smoke billowing out of both. The second plane had already hit, and I'm looking at it, and I'm like, okay. And they said, the second plane already hit. They were talking about it, and I walked into the other room where my roommate was sleeping. I'm like, Dave, you gotta wake up. He goes, why? He's like, what's going on? I'm like, we've been attacked. We're at war.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
And of course, after that, we have the Pentagon. Then we find out, we're all just, we're glued to CNN the entire day. But we watched the towers fall live.
That was horrible. Horrible.
And the problem is, once everything was shut down, I went to class. So I'm like, I don't know what else to do because I had a little bit of time, and we were just like, I could sit here and watch CNN, or I could go to class. And of course, everyone's on edge. I actually had a theater class that day, and he flipped out. It called us all terrorists because a couple of kids were laughing at their demonstration of no theater. But it was, like I said, when I heard it, I was just walking out of the building, and we didn't know. But it's like in my, like something was telling me this is bad. This is not what you think it is. This is one of those moments where life changes and everything pivots, and it's like. There was a before 9/11 and an after 9/11, and I was just thinking about. I've been thinking about this over the years. It's like my son lives in a world where the Twin Towers has never existed.
We have a whole new generation now.
Yeah, he can vote now, and the world he's inhabited has never had the World Trade Center. 9/11 means nothing to him. He's aware of it. But it doesn't have. It has the same emotional impact as Pearl Harbor does to me, right?
Or the Space Shuttle Challenger, even.
Well, I was alive for for Challenger. I saw it happen. I saw that happen.
Assassination. Then
exactly. It's like it's a historical event. It wouldn't have mattered if it happened 20 years or 30 years or 100 years ago. It doesn't matter. It's a historical event. For him, it's an entire. Sorry, allergies are killing me. It's an entirely historic event for him. It's he was at no point was he alive for that. So it strikes me as like you said, it doesn't feel like it's been 20 years.
It doesn't seem like it's been 20 years. It doesn't.
In fact, I think the thing that really struck sort of has stayed with me, one of those weird things, right? Remember the first Spider-Man movie that came out with Tobey Maguire?
Yeah, 2002, I think, when that was.
Right. It was. So the thing is, the original poster for it was his head sort of poking out, because we'd all been talking about the movie. Clearly I'm a comic fan, right?
Sure.
So we'd all been talking about when they were starting to release the images of him in the costume. Like, man, this is awesome. Well, that first poster, and my friend got it. When it first came out, they had the Twin Towers reflected in his eye. And remember in the very first teaser trailer they did for it, were these guys robbing a bank and escaping in a helicopter that at some point as it's escaping, it starts slowing down. You start hearing this stretching noise, and then it snaps, and it ends up in a giant web between the World Trade Center. That was their.
Wow.
That was the the teaser trailer for Spider-Man, which had and that had been out for a month or two.
Something
by
like
the time
that.
when September 11th had happened. Like that was actually supposed to be in the film. Of course, they obviously cut that. So it's those little things where you're like, wow. I mean, that's it.
Yeah.
It just everything sort of shifted, and there's this before and after. It's like all of my children were born in this new age. This was an event that changed everything. They are products of this new America, like
This new world.
this new world. For my kids, they are never going to watch a new movie where the girl's getting ready to go off to Italy and the guy is running through the airport to catch her that's never going to happen anymore.
Yeah.
Like that trope is gone.
Innocence lost, basically. Yeah.
Well, you can call it innocence, you can call it naivete, you can call it whatever you want. But it's these little indications of how the world has substantively changed. It's not the same world that we lived in. It's one of those events that changes everything moving forward, and it happens so quickly, right? It happened like that, and we can't go back to that. Like we're never going to be the America that we were before we got hit. We've morphed into something completely different. Even our presuppositions are gone. It's like our entire worldview altered on that day.
It's gone
in that one morning.
I've heard it said that we will never be at September 10th, 2001 ever again.
Yeah,
that's
fair
too.
Yeah, that's exactly the same thing. It's like that morning. Really, the whole thing only took like 12 minutes, right?
Yeah.
Like we think all of this took forever, but it's like it didn't. It was less than a sitcom, and our world was forever changed.
Just literally, if I can use this, crumbled. Literally, I mean, quite literally.
Yeah.
So.
And again, it's one of those things where everybody knew. I think the other thing that struck me as weird was everybody knew somebody who was there that day.
Absolutely.
Even if you didn't know someone who was there, you knew somebody who did.
Absolutely.
That's true. I had a couple of friends. In fact, actually, the girlfriend of a friend of mine I'd grown up with, she, like, when I was leaving for class, we found her crying because her brother was a New York firefighter and he did die that day.
Oh man!
But she didn't know that at that time. And there were other people who were skipping because they're like their friends, their brother. They couldn't get a hold. They worked at or they worked in the Twin Towers, and they didn't know. They didn't, nobody could get anything. Nobody knew anything.
There was no news, nothing. Yeah.
It took us actually 3 days to find. I think 3 or 4 days to find out that he had died. Most everyone else was fine, but like there were people who were just breaking down crying because like I can't get a hold of my cousin. I can't get a hold of my dad. I can't get a hold of whomever.
Yeah.
Because they worked there, or they were right by it, or they were a firefighter or a police officer in New York. Like everybody knew, either everybody knew someone or everybody knew someone who knew someone.
It affected everybody for sure.
It was everybody, and it was all walks of life. And it's just one of those things where, like, it was just the weirdest. It's just that weirdest times. Like everything's different, and it's affecting everybody. And just to watch them fall. Right.
That was an image I'll never get away. Yeah.
It's insane to even just think about them collapsing because you don't see that, right? It's just one of those things where it's like, I've watched I've never watched a building that tall collapse, but they were always, you're aware they're going to collapse because it's been set up, it's been happening for weeks, and you're watching for it. This was not something that's just not supposed to happen.
It wasn't, yeah.
So it was scarring. Like I remember being in the art lab like a week later. Like we were all trying to work on our next project, obviously, and like nobody could do anything. You've got a bunch of artists, and we're supposed to do something for a grade, and we're like, what in the hell are we supposed to paint?
Exactly.
And I was just sitting there, just staring at my board. And we were listening to just some radio program, and they were talking about It's an art lab, so they had NPR on. And I remember we were just sitting there. I was trying to actually, it's probably my highest selling painting of all time is what it would turn into. It's on permanent display now at the Bank of America building off of Zhang. As part of their permanent 9/11 memorial. But I was working on it then, and just this NPR thing, they were talking about this little kid who they were talking to the children, like, what do you want to, what do you wish? And it was just a little girl. She goes, I wish I was Superwoman so I could have gone and saved all those people.
Oh, wow.
And you're like, I mean, it was that whole time, there is no word for it.
No, there's not at that point. No,
it's trauma. It's emotion. Everyone's angry and sad and scared. And honestly, there was a moment when we all kind of were, the people living in my apartment, we all actually stopped. Like, it took a couple of days, but we were like, wait, hold up. No, it was still that same day. We were all like, hold on. This is the tallest building outside of, in East Texas that we were in. Garner at the time was over at SFA. It was just a tall cylindrical building, but they had turned into apartments. And I was living at towards the top. We actually all stopped. We're like, hold on. It was during that period where we didn't know what was going on. We're like, okay, clearly we can't be on the board for something like this, right?
Sure.
We started asking those questions and realized that was one of the things they told you about in the brochure was, this is the tallest building in East Texas. And you're like, okay, I mean, that's cool, but what? And then you're like, well, hold on. What if there is, there are people out there that are just looking for something? Because we didn't know. And obviously my family lived out of Dallas, and we're like, well, we know they targeted Dallas, right? Because it's one of the few cities that everyone around the world knows.
Absolutely.
Right? It's New York. Like, if you go anywhere on the planet, there are like 3 or 4 cities everyone knows: New York, Washington D.C., Los Angeles, and then Dallas.
Absolutely.
And so I'm obviously I'm worried about my family. It's like, well, it's Dallas. Are they going to try to attack there? And at that point, I realized, because we didn't know anything, and so there was nothing but fear, and it was just this. You were just living in this soup of the unknown. It's like the only thing we knew was the death toll. Everything we didn't know is where's it going to happen next.
Yeah, it was horrible. Yeah.
So it was a very, very strange time. And of course,
absolutely,
I was there when the space shuttle blew up.
Sure.
Over us. So that was as equally an eerie day, not nearly as emotional a day. But it's like that one little town in East Texas. I happened to be there when everything changed.
Yeah.
So, and for me, that's all I can ever think of whenever I drive back through there. This is where I was when the entire world spun around to something new.
Yeah. Well, Jason, I appreciate you being here for this special 9/11 memorial and memory show. Thank you very much for sharing your memories with us. Thank you. And again, for to say it's been 20 years is pretty.
It's insane. Yeah, it's like essentially half my it literally splits at this age, splits my life in half.
Right.
Like it just sort of split it, and it's like, okay, well, but again, it split all of our lives in half at one point.
Absolutely.
And it's I appreciate you coming on and giving me a chance to talk about this. I haven't really talked about most of this in years.
Sure. Hopefully, like I said, but the goal of this is people that are going to be guests tonight. Hopefully, this will stay out there for years to come, and the new generation can just, we're giving them, information like our past parents, grandparents, great grandparents gave us. So, again, thank you, Jason, for your time, and
I appreciate your time.
Memories.
Thank you, sir. You have a good one.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'll bring some other guests on, but I do want to share some more pictures of heroes that day. Those guys that were out there that horrific day, they really worked. Like here's one here. those firefighters, you've heard, they were just exhausted, working round the clock. Other firefighters from other departments, other cities, other states even came to help these guys out. You got to put this in a context for those of you that weren't even born then. These guys are having to work knowing some of their buddies have already perished in that tragedy. So, and then working just nonstop. I'm sure they were just completely worn out. But there were other, all kinds of heroes. They see a police officer and a fireman here helping a gentleman out from that tragic day. So every one of them, military included, paramedics, everybody that volunteered to even help out, definitely heroes in that book under the most difficult circumstances. So let's continue with the 9/11 memorial. We're sharing our memories, where we all were, what we remember, those of us that were there. So let me bring my next guest on now. Ladies and gentlemen.
Hey there.
Hi, Mike. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Mike. Mike was on episode 2 of my show. He was talking about classic arcade games. He refurbishes them, even has his own business in North Texas. So, Mike, welcome back to the Van Buren Variety Show.
Oh, it's good to be on, Bob. Can you hear me good?
Absolutely.
Okay, awesome.
So, Mike, this is my 20-year, the show's 20-year memorial and remembrance of 9/11. We're talking about what happened to us personally that day. So I'll bring you the same questions that I've asked everybody so far. Well,
sure.
Where were you? What were you doing? And how did you first hear about the tragic news there on September 11th?
Well, like your previous guest said, you're looking at something that split my life here, because I was in my early 20s at the time. And I, believe it or not, had a coaching job and had a classroom even at that time period. And I think I had my homeroom class, and I remember sitting there, and I used to listen to The Ticket in the morning at my desk, just on the radio real low while the kids were working. And I remember it was the morning musers. Obviously, they were still on with Craig and George and gosh, it's hard to even think right now with all that. I just remember them saying, and they'll go over this every year about this time of year. It's like you hear that recording again, and it just brings you back to that moment where there's like, is this live? Because they had a TV on in the background, and they were saying, is this live at the World Trade Center? Is this old footage? Is this? They just didn't even know what was going on. And then you hear this whoa when that second plane hit, because there's so much confusion when you're watching this footage. Is this alive? Like, what happened? And then the second plane hit because it's on camera at that point.
And saw that. Yeah,
it was a real shocker. And I kind of turned the radio up, and I was letting the classroom listen. And this was the end of the time period where we had the old AV carts with where you could like tune to the TV.
Remember those.
Remember that? Yeah. So I remember having we pulled the TV in to my class. I had one of the bigger classrooms. I had a computer lab in there. And anyway, yeah, we watched it unfold. And I mean, that was the way I spent the next week. Every night when I would go home, or through the weekends, or what, you're just glued to the TV. Watching this footage and trying to see if there was going to be survivors and who did this, and just has those little things unfolded. It was, that's where I was. I was coaching and, watching over a classroom at the time. And I heard about it on the radio as it was happening live. And then we watched it unfold in front of a class full of kids. And, it was the same thing of, wow, how is this going to affect our lives from here on out? I remember, people writing stuff on the backs of their trucks and in the back windows of their cars and stuff like that. Like, remember 9/11 and things. I remember these kids, all of a sudden it was this moment where we forgot all our differences and we were all just Americans again, where there was nothing, there was some cohesion all of a sudden, because we're being attacked from something from the outside. So that was, again, it was all just really shocking. But yeah, classroom, that's where I was.
And I'm sure it goes without saying that, I mean, studies and lessons and school pretty much just stopped that day, did it not?
Oh, done. Yeah, we were done. We're just watching that TV all day. And I mean, it was just continued footage of a smoking building. And then when they fell, it's like the whole gasp of just sitting with a room full of, kids, and just seeing the gas, hearing the gasp and seeing it, it's pretty wild.
How old were your students about? What was the age group?
I mean, I had upper middle school and high school age students, so they weren't a whole lot younger than me, at the time. So it was a wild situation. I just remember talking about it with them, and then talking about it with my friends afterwards, and some of the same concerns, us being in Dallas, the previous guest had, us being in Dallas, is this something we're going to get hit? Is Carswell Air Force Base going to get hit? I mean, because at that time, you had so many questions, and you look back at it now, and it's a different set of glasses you're looking through. But at the time, it's okay. They targeted the Pentagon. One plane went down in a field somewhere. Both the tall buildings in a major city. I mean, sporting events. You remember how, like, sporting events were just everything was on hold all of a sudden.
Broadway, all the plays that were there were canceled.
Everything.
At that point.
And then afterwards, you had all those little scares with like anthrax and all the other little. Yeah. Like now, our stuff's getting mailed. So this terrorism all of a sudden was a word that didn't seem so foreign to us. It was like it was a part of our common everyday vernacular, and every you're all, am I afraid to get the mail? The way we went through the airport changed, all of a sudden it's like, well, I can't bring shampoo of this size. I can't do this. And I can't do that. And you're taking off all different kinds of clothes and random searches and that sort of thing. I can tell you the difference in just several years there. And this may sound very foreign to someone that's younger that didn't grow up before this. Like he was talking about his kids. My daughter, I have twin girls. My daughters were 1 when this happened.
She has no memory of this then.
No, not like this, not like we would. But I remember when I was in high school, just several years before that, I was in drama, and we used to do this getting comfortable in your skin kind of drama activity. And we would go to DFW Airport, and you could get beyond the TSA, like easy. Like we're just going to meet people as they get off the plane. Now you have to wait on the other side of all the check-in gates. Used to, you could be right up there. And we would walk through the airport and the hub and, do different little drama stuff. So, we'd act like one of us was blind and the other one was leading them through, or, just stuff like that, to where you can see the reactions of other people because they don't know that you're acting at that point. And this is something we did in the hub of the airport. And now you couldn't even get back there without a ticket and going through TSA and everything. So
they would grab you immediately.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, you sure as heck weren't fooling around once you got back there. So even though that was, part of our class, but still it was, just, I don't know. It's wild to think about. I visited New York. I had never been before, but I went the following year after 9/11. Really? So I walked along the edge. I'm trying to remember what month I went in, but it would, obviously a lot of construction. They had pulled out pretty much all of the rubble,
debris,
basically. The rubble and debris had been completely pulled out. So you had basically, I remember walking along and there was a huge fence line, and some of the buildings around where the towers were almost plastic bagged up on the side where they had been damaged from that. And I guess they were emptied out too. Mm-hmm. A lot of people, I don't even think about that. I didn't until I saw it. And then I couldn't believe how deep the hole was. Like it was
really,
I mean, had to been, gosh, I mean, on your mind's eye, it seemed like it was forever down deep, where I guess so much parking garage and everything, and below that, or how much damage and all that weight going down. I mean, it was just massive underneath those towers, and that had all been cleared out. I mean, when you look down into there, the bulldozer looked like this small. It looked like Hot Wheels, like way down in there. It was crazy to see. So, and it was so somber, and then of course you have so many flowers and notes and everything all on that that fence line that had it, they had a big tall chain link fence around it. And, it was just surreal, and it felt like a memorial. I've went back since then to New York, now that they have the whole memorial actually built. And again, if you haven't experienced that, you need to. Anybody that
I would.
Yeah. Yeah. Anybody that hasn't been to that 9/11 memorial, there's a huge tower and you can go up in it, and basically it shows you, lots of, there's lots of just memorial stuff. It's almost like a museum that's been built in honor of this. And then obviously where the towers actually stood, those are big, rectangular waterfalls that fall in. And then they have the names of all the, basically victims of it all around it. So it's again, a sombering experience, and to see it unfold on TV and then to see it right after, a year after, and now to see it, at this point, it was 17 years later. It was a few years ago when I went to New York. I don't know, and the previous gentleman you had on before talking about the Spider-Man trailer. I remember kids, we'd have these, because it was a little charter school, we'd have these little classes that were just kind of break classes for these kids out of their different, if they had a free period. And I remember watching Spider-Man on our computer and talking about how that poster, like he had mentioned, I remember seeing that. Anyway,
it changed the whole world. Exactly.
It did. I just finished watching, some further viewing for you on Netflix. There's a 9/11, or it's called Turning Point 9/11 on, and it's the 9/11 and the war on terror. It's on Netflix right now. Me and my wife just watched it. I think it's like 5 episodes long, and it's really good. It shows it shows you our reaction to it and how we went into Afghanistan, and how, then we, switched gears and did this, that, and how our troops have been over there. It really gives you another perspective of everything that happened afterwards, where our lives changed forever, but there was some normalization eventually. And then, but all these troops, there was no normalization for them. They were sent off to another country and been over there for forever. So you get to see some reaction to that. It's definitely worth a watch.
Now, just for myself and for the audience, what was the name of this show? And it's on Netflix.
It's called Turning Point. I actually made a note of it. Okay. Turning Point, 9/11 and the War on Terror. It's on Netflix right now. Me and my wife just finished it.
I'd like to watch
basically, it's it documents everything unfolding from 9/11 to now. It literally leads right up to the decision to pull the troops out. It's very, very up to date. We were like, wow, this was very thing. It's like they filmed this right up until a few weeks ago. It's pretty wild.
Okay. Well, I want to ask you one more question. You said you were in class that day. What was the reaction of your students? Were any of them, I'm shocked, obviously, but were any of them crying or worried?
I think there's way more shock than anything. I don't remember anybody crying. I just remember everybody's confused and doesn't understand. And, I feel like teenagers are going through so much when they're going through high school and stuff anyway. And then all of a sudden you have something that happens to our country and you're trying to explain to them how big this event was, but it's hard for you even to being so far away from it, but still feeling so hit by it. You feel so confused on how to even relay that.
Sure.
So shock was what I remember the most, but again, it's 20 years ago, unbelievably.
And I tell everybody that has been on, even you, that when I hear 20 years of a memorial, I was like, 20 years, has it been that long?
Right.
It's hard to believe. Well, Mike, I appreciate you being on. Thank you for this 9/11 memorial show that you've done with this. So thank you very much for sharing your memories with us. We appreciate it.
Absolutely, Bob. Anytime you need me, holler at me.
Sure will, Mike. And ladies and gentlemen, just to kind of bring it back, this was the original towers in New York, and they were 110 stories high. So tragically, when those buildings came down, you can just imagine the carnage happened that day. So the skyline changed forever in New York that day. And obviously the environment for the world did too, and especially here in America. We're talking about some TV shows like Spider-Man, things that Hollywood had to do differently. I remember this. There was a local channel about a week after the 9/11 tragedy. As you know, every network was showing news of that tragic day. But I remember looking, that's when we used to have, I'm aging myself, paper TV guides, paper cable guides. And there was a movie that was going to come on one of the local channels about a week after. The name of the movie was Independence Day. It was made in 1996. For those of you who don't know, that's about an alien invasion from outer space. And one thing that they do is they zap all the major cities in the world. And I remember when I saw that, I'm like, are they really going to show that? Because one of the scenes in that movie, they zap a large Empire State Building in New York. And then it shows the carnage like the next day after in the movie, and the World Trade Centers are just completely obliterated. I'm like, that would be a really bad taste for them to show that movie. So out of just curiosity, I flipped over to that channel to see if they were showing it. We are preempting this movie. We're going to present our this movie, Mrs. Doubtfire, a comedy. So I'm like, good. They recognized it. They corrected it, because I mean that would have been a bad taste to show that. So I think people were ready to kind of get away from it for a while. So yeah, Mrs. Doubtfire was absolutely a good replacement for that movie. So I remember that memory as well. So ladies and gentlemen, let me bring in another previous guest that I had on the show that's back with us tonight for this special 9/11 memorial episode. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce you to Amy of What the Paranormal. She was in episode 9, and we were talking about the paranormal,
Yes.
Which was a very interesting show. So Amy, welcome back to the Van Buren Variety Show.
Thank you for having me back.
So Amy, tonight's episode obviously is about 9/11, 20 years later, September the 11th, 2001,
Yes.
a date that nobody will ever forget. So
No.
I will bring you the same questions I've given every other guest. Where were you? What were you doing? And how did you first hear that something was tragically wrong that day?
Well, me and my husband both worked as nurses at our local hospital, and we had just finished a 12-hour shift. We come home, and my husband went to bed. And of course, we had a 1-year-old at that time, so I didn't go to bed right away. I stayed up, was cleaning. I had the TV on, and the TV started going crazy. Like you could hear people yelling, when things started happening and stuff. And I went and sat down and was watching it, and I was just like, wow, that's crazy. That plane just hit, and automatically you don't think terrorism, you just, you think it was a freak accident.
Mm-hmm.
I was praying for the people that were in the plane and in the building. And then it come across, as I was watching it, another plane had hit the building. And so I went in and I woke my husband up, and I said, something's going on. I said that both of the towers have been hit by planes. And my husband was just looking at me. He was very confused because I just woke him up and I was yelling. And so he was like, well, what is it? And I said, I don't know. So I went back and was watching it. And then as soon as I heard about the Pentagon, I went and woke him up again, and he got right up out of bed and come in there. And we were trying to watch and see what was going on. And it was just crazy. I was doing the same as a lot of previous guests have said. I have a lot of family that lives in Dallas. I have an uncle and a cousin that worked at DFW. So I was trying to get a hold of them, just to tell them to be careful or to get away from any big buildings or anything, because we didn't know where it was going next. There's a gnat or something. But I was so concerned for anyone that was in big cities. And I live in a small town, and I mean, you could see people gathering, talking about it and stuff like that. And it was crazy because even though all this was just happening, it seemed like by that night, our town was out of fuel. People were filling up their farm equipment.
Wow. I didn't
we
think
have a lot
about
of
that.
farmers here. We have a lot of farmers here. And so everybody was in town, you know, all the people that live out in the country, you know, everybody was just congregated in town, and you could see them up at the Dairy Queen parking lot, the car wash, you know, parking lot. And it was crazy seeing everybody just together, and everybody was just trying to figure out what was going on. But, it was overwhelming, very overwhelming.
You said you worked at a hospital. Did the hospital call y'all back, or did you see when you went back to work any change? I guess any rush? People going to the ER, maybe a panic
very
attack?
Small hospital, so I think we had 30 rooms at that hospital. So we didn't see a big change there. But I do know a lot of our nurses went to like some bigger hospitals and stuff like that, and we did do a bunch of like blood drives and stuff like that. We did see a lot of that. And we had a lot of our employees go to bigger hospitals to help with that kind of stuff. So, but here in our town, the only thing that we really seen different was the fuel. Like it was a few days before you could get fuel. And when they did get fuel, the lines were just backed up, you know, down the highway. So
you're completely out of gas. People going for gas gouging, I guess you could say, or gas getting it. Wow. Yeah.
And so, but we did for the longest time, we did stay away from bigger cities and stuff because, you know, that put that fear in your head because all the places that were hit were well known.
Mm-hmm.
And so I worried a lot about, a lot of the guys come on, and I've noticed that, a lot of their reactions were, when are we going to go, you know, get these people, you know, stuff like that. And I think women took it more as their motherly instincts took over.
Sure.
And so it was, we wanted to protect what was ours, but we wanted to do whatever we could for the families that lost so many, you know, there. But I do know our fire departments, we have volunteer fire departments. We don't have, you know, like big fire departments, but they went through and gathered bottled water, canned goods, you know, stuff like that. And they all took off up that way when they did start allowing people to come in to help. So it was, you definitely saw a sense of community.
You did. Absolutely. Everybody.
In the months and months, even years after that. And it's sad that it takes something like that to bring everybody together.
We were united. We were all united there for a while.
Yes. There was no color. There was no, you know, gender. There was no nothing. We were all together.
Americans.
And
we were Americans. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's the first time we had seen that in a very long time.
You know, you mentioned something, Amy, I forgot about. So this is something for our future generation. There were blood drives across the country.
Yes.
People donating blood to the victims for New York because there was a blood shortage. And I'm people, me included, started rolling up our sleeves like, okay, here's me.
Yeah.
You know, and I remember the grocery stores too. You mentioned something else where I was living at the time. It was not so much of a big city, but not really a small town. But water was one of the first things to go.
Yes. Yeah.
And batteries. A lot of batteries were flying off the shelves too.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and it wasn't one of them things where everybody was saying, "Oh, somebody took all the," you know, kind of like with the C word, that took all the toilet paper or whatever. It was
right.
It was like, okay, well that's gone, so that means all that got sent to them. You know, it wasn't people getting angry that it was being taken. It was
exactly
okay. I came to buy that anyway for them, so it definitely did hit some of the stores. And the fuel, I'm not sure how it hit a lot of the major cities and stuff, but I know a lot of the smaller towns and stuff where I live in north central Texas, the fuel was gone. Like people were so scared of what was going to get hit next or took over or whatever. And so they wanted to have a route, a way to get out if they needed to. So there was community, but there was also a lot of fear.
A lot of panic. There was panic for sure.
There was a lot of panic, yes.
And like I said, in my opening monologue, I worked at a bank at the time and back office, and my job was to monitor from a screen the activity of all of our ATMs.
Yeah.
And I didn't see what I would call a run on the bank, but I saw people making larger than normal withdrawals. Yeah. I saw it was $300, $400, $500, and sometimes they were the same person getting their money out. They were panicked that maybe the banks would fail, or maybe the bank would get hit.
Yeah.
The financial system would just collapse. So, but it wasn't a quote run. I didn't see, at least at the bank I worked at the time, there wasn't a run, but people were taking money out just in case. So. Yeah,
I didn't. My first thought really wasn't the money or anything, and I really didn't even think about the gas thing. I think I was just concerned with the victims and everything like that. So it was. I think it's different for moms. We had a different outlook on it.
Sure, I agree
and stuff. So, but yeah, go ahead.
You know what you just said, Amy Jean wants to add to it too. I'll show her comment. She says ammo flew off the shelf too. So,
yeah,
I'm sure.
Well, I live in Texas. That's normal here. So, ammo flying off the shelves in Texas is normal. But yeah, I'm sure it did all over the place.
So, when you first heard about it, Amy, did you have time to wonder like who did it? Why would they do it? Or
I asked that question all day long. Like, I kept asking how were they able to do it? That was my biggest question. How were they able to do it? And I was trying to figure out who would want to do this to the United States, and which, I mean, there's obvious answers, but my biggest question was how were they able to do it so easily?
Yeah, I mean, and to use it against innocent civilians that had nothing to do with their quote agenda. I don't understand it. I mean, there was, a loss of life is anything, but there were even young toddlers on that plane. I'm like, really? I don't know what, from a personal standpoint, I don't know what they were trying to prove there, but it just, when you do stuff like that, your message is just gone.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no excuse for that.
No.
And so, yeah, it was a day. I want to ask you, like I've asked everybody else, Amy, does it seem like 20 years or no?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. No. It didn't even dawn on me because my daughter was 1 year old when it happened, and she's 21 now.
She has no memory then of this.
No. So their generation has no clue what we're even remembering. They can go back and watch videos and stuff like that, but if you didn't live through it, and us, just watching it from afar, we were nowhere near it.
Yeah, we were watching it on TV, most of it.
But it's still hard on a lot of us. So I can't even imagine what it's been like for the people who were there, and had to see it in person, and the people that lost their family members. So my heart still breaks for them.
It does. I mean, and I'm sure, like I said, I personally don't know anybody that survived it or a family member of someone who was lost. I can only imagine the pain that they're going through and have gone through. Again, firefighters, policemen, paramedics, first responders that saw their brothers die in that. I mean,
still went in and did their job.
And still
went in and did their job.
I heard a story where there was an evacuation order. I think they thought one of the planes or one of the buildings was going to collapse. A lot of these firefighters screamed back, "We're not leaving. Our brothers are still down there." And I mean, that's brotherly love right there. So, well, Amy, I appreciate you coming back to the show and sharing your memories. And again, the point was hopefully the next generation that watches maybe these videos, we're giving our personal stories,
Right.
as our previous generations have done with us. So, September 11th, 2001 was a tragedy, but I think it's important to know where everybody was at that time.
Exactly.
And
And we will never forget. And things like this is the reason why we won't. So thank you very much for doing this.
Okay. Thank you, Amy. Have a great night.
Okay. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it for this special episode of the Van Buren Variety Show. Thank you for tuning in. Again, this was the 20-year memorial episode of the September 11th, 2001 tragedies. The buildings may be gone, but they'll never be forgotten. And most importantly, the people that were affected by this tragedy, both in the buildings, in the planes, in the Pentagon, they will never, ever be forgotten. So family members and friends of those that were victims, just know that they will live on in our hearts. So I hope you take comfort in that their memories will always be with us. And again, our sympathies from the entire country. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it for this episode of the Van Buren Variety Show. I'm certainly glad you tuned in. Just a reminder, I'm here once a week with an individual guest talking about a different topic. Could be a hobby of theirs, could be a how-to segment, might be a hobby, maybe some entertainment coming up. So if you haven't subscribed already, make sure you subscribe. And as always, if you have anybody that wants to be on the show, you'll see an email address for the show coming up at the end of this broadcast. So send me an email and I'll see if I can get them fixed up for you. So in the meantime, this is Bob Van Buren for the Van Buren Variety Show on this special edition 9/11 episode. Have a great week, everybody. Good night.